Staying with that story now, let's bring in a senior research fellow and political economist at Trade Collective, Dr. Lebohang Pheko. She joins us now via our telephone line. Dr. Pheko, thank you so much for your time this evening, ma'am, here on SABC News. Let's start off here. I mean, we are seeing the US tariffs set to kick in later this month. And we've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa today at the Union Buildings also then stressing and saying that, of course, intensive negotiations still continue with the US. Is it a bit too late to try and sway the US's favor into, of course, benefiting South Africa?
So thank you. I think the question of too late is perhaps a bit of a red herring, because we have to remember that a few months ago we were on the global stage at the White House trying to do exactly that. And the impression that was given after that was that a lot of the damage that has been done to the relationship, largely by President Trump's own, unilateralism and a very strong-handed behavior towards the rest of the world in terms of economics and trade relations. And the thought was that, the feeling was that, this had been fixed, and that, of course, we are now going to hold hands and trade on much more amicable terms. But it's clear that the United States has a long-term view, which is really trying to reinstate themselves as the global hegemony in terms of trade and investment, and also really trying to reinstate a particular posture, which is really not really negotiation, is it? It's really one of really making demands on the rest of the world, with which the rest of the world has to accede and has to comply. So I'm not sure whether it's a case of too late, because I don't know whether anybody would have ever been ready for this kind of trade aggression.
And of course, we do now know that these tariffs are set to increase from 15% to at least 30%. And one that also asks, when it comes to South Africa's economy, what are the implications thereof should we see this 30% tariff increase kick in later this month?
So, a couple of things, Mbani, that we should really think about. The one is that we actually, other than the automotive sector that people have spoken of, the agricultural sector, including our citrus, our wines, and our car manufacturing, knowing that this is a hub, we should also be aware that the trade and investment between ourselves and the United States only represents about 7% of our total trade. And I'm not saying that it's insignificant, and I'm certainly not suggesting that we should be cavalier about this. But I also think that we should avoid too much panic. The other thing is that 30% of 30% tariffs so far, but that also means that there's a 70% window of elasticity and of opportunity. So whilst, of course, there might be job losses, whilst, of course, there might be reduced economic growth, we should also bear in mind that we do have the opportunity, which we've always had, that to trade with other partners. We have very cordial relationships across Southern Africa, within the continent, and, of course, with the European Union, which is one of our biggest trading partners, and certainly with other parts of Asia, like China, of course, but certainly including India, Malaysia, Indonesia. So it's also an opportunity for us to be a lot less centered on the United States as though it is a complete disaster, whilst understanding that certainly this is a far from favorable, situation. The other thing is, of course, the benefits for the United States economy, of course, are the protection of their domestic industries. Now, I'm hoping that in the menu of assistance that President Ramaphosa alluded to today at Union Buildings, that this includes protection of our own domestic industries. That this could potentially lead to somehow recovering the lost revenue, because what tariffs do is, of course, they generate revenue for the government. And we also use tariffs. Every state has the levity to use tariffs, Mbali. And I mean, we have weak tariffs infamously, and they're very effective because that is one of our primary sectors. And we change and we alter them seasonally. We watch what other countries are charging on their wheat imports and exports. and we continue to remain extremely competitive. So we know that we need to be able to use these instruments with much more flexibility and I think and a lot more strategically as well. Whilst, of course, appreciating that the United States is not necessarily playing very nicely in this moment.
And Dr. Pheko, something that you also point out to is something that we really heard right after these tariffs were announced is that South Africa should start looking towards other markets. What's the possibility as South Africa looks beyond the US to ensure that it is able to bridge the gap and ensure that it does save the South African market?
Look, we can also, as I've mentioned, we can diversify our own trade and economic possibilities. These are things, of course, which are part of the kind of economic and industrial policy that has already been developed in Bali. These are not new or certainly innovative ideas. We already have a really interesting and very exciting industrial policy, which for some reason we have chosen not to really fully implement. We have several, for example, clauses which pop up for the production of computer parts, production of car seats, of leather, of components, of mechanical and industrial components, which would actually set us on a different level rather than just sending out the kind of raw materials, which in fact we're aware, as President Trump explicitly stated at the White House, is really at the core now of a lot of what the United States wants from South Africa and countries like South Africa. Also bearing in mind that the United States is hoping that South Africa is going to be a gateway, and I think one of the trade representatives stated this quite explicitly, into the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they have a great need for the kind of our mineral resources. So we need to be able to think very quickly around the sort of industrial policy that we have already got in place, which are supposed to be able to place us in a position of sending finished projects, of doing much more value addition. Now, these are not things that we can do overnight. These are not things that are going to be in effect in the next 30 days in time for us to absorb the impact of these tariffs. But I think that it might be an opportunity for us to accelerate some of the programs that we should have put in place over the last 30 years so that we would not have this over-reliance on a few key traditional trading partners in a few key trading sectors. And as a mining nation...
Unfortunately, Dr. Pheko, we have run out of time. Thank you so much there. That is Dr. Pheko. They're just giving us her insights. And that's in relation to those U.S. reciprocal tariffs, which are set to kick in a few days' time.